Some of the most common miniature painting mistakes won't just make your minis worse, they will make your hobby absolutely tedious. So in this video, I'm gonna reveal what the most common mistakes are, how any painter can avoid them, and what are my own solutions that'll make your minis better and your hobby way more fun. And to explain the first one, let me ask you, what do these two minis have in common? Even though it might not look like they are similar at all, they share features that any good model should have. Let's start with the Squig Rider. What are the most prominent features on this mini that stand out to you? Most likely it's gonna be the helmet and the Squig's face. And this is by no accident. When you really think about it, this mini tells a story of a knightly goblin riding a wild beast. This funny juxtaposition is what makes this model work, and it tells a story by itself. So whenever I'm painting Squig Rider minis, I put extra effort into the Squig's face and the helmet, because that's what's appealing about these minis, not necessarily the weapons. If the mistake that I am talking about is still not obvious to you, don't worry, it'll make sense soon. So let's have a look at this guy. Well, the story in this case is more straightforward. We have a stoic warrior killing a monster with his big-ass weapon. These are the three most important elements that tell you what this model is really about. And in the final result, you can clearly see that I am pointing your attention towards them. To do that, I made sure that there are some of the brightest colors near the facial area, that the sword is more saturated as well as bright, and finally, I differentiated the monster from the environment by using warmer colors. And also, I generally put more effort into these aforementioned parts. And that's exactly it. In the past, I painted many miniatures without giving them any particular focal point. However, if you put more effort into the most prominent features of your minis, not only will it make them more interesting, but it'll make you faster. Since I knew that in this case I gotta focus on the three big focal points, I didn't have to stress over every single plate of the armor or every fold of the fabric. Even in the Squig Rider's case, I didn't really bother refining his weapon or the robe too much. And once you do identify the focal points, the question is, okay, but how do I paint it? That's actually the second mistake. Sometimes you see a model online and tell yourself,
wow, that's a really cool miniature.
And the next thing you know, you're already painting it, while knowing fuck all how to approach it. Wanna paint dramatic light? Find a reference. Painting swords? Find a reference. Wanna do some rimming? Reference. So first, let me show you which references I looked for to paint this Guts model. The first one comes from the people who made this model, the CA3D Studio, who are conveniently today's sponsor. And this is pretty good first step to know what the hell are you supposed to do. However, I noticed that there is this weird flap on the armor, and I didn't know if it's part of it or some kind of leather or something. So to be really super duper sure, I found an action figure. And yeah, that might sound stupid, but hey, it works. Another thing you can do, which I already mentioned like a zillion times, if you don't know where to paint the reflections, take a photo of your mini in a black primer and copy them once you start painting. This is really useful if you have no other reference and you have to make sure that the reflections work. But for this model, I didn't really need it. However, since I wanted to paint it as if Guts is slaying demons in the middle of the night, I had to look for a reference to paint skin tones in the moonlight. And for that, I took an advice from Arnau Lazaro and went to Pinterest. This is an amazing resource for miniature painting references, and I ended up using some of his saved pictures, which featured blue light on skin tones. And once I properly inspected the references in Photoshop, it was clear that I'll have to use way more gray midtones than I initially intended to. And you don't have to use just art references. This particular frame is from one of my videos, and by itself it can give you a good idea how the cold light interacts with skin. Now to talk about the next mistake, let's imagine a hypothetical painter that really enjoys wet blending. And let's say that this painter enjoys wet blending so much so that he uses it for pretty much everything. Wet blend the skin, wet blend the fabric, wet blend the base, wet blend your mom. Well, maybe not the last one. And since I am talking about it like that, you must be asking, what is wrong with wet blending? Well, it sucks. Well, not really, I jest, of course. Theoretically, using just wet blending is fine. However, the logical consequence of this is that everything will look kinda the same. Different techniques and different brushstrokes give you different finish. And if you use the same technique and the same brushstrokes all the time, it's not surprising that there is no visual variety. I'm sure that you have seen pictures of some very well painted armies that are painted by dedicated painting studios, and unfortunately some of them have this very distinct airbrushed look. Again, there is nothing wrong with it per se, but I know for a fact that it's like 90% airbrushed and maybe there's some oil wash and edge highlights, and that's it. If you want way more interesting result, however, it's better to use wider arsenal of different techniques. For example, if I want a smooth result, I use a combination of layering and glazing. But to add more variety, I don't shy away from adding texture by painting lines and dots. And by doing that, you have more visual interest on your models, and it'll stop the viewer's eyes so they have more of a proper look at it. And if I want my minis to look like dog shit, I'll use dry brush. This is a joke, by the way. Or even when we talk about airbrushing, I don't always use it to paint layers with high coverage. I also use it frequently to apply thin filters to influence the color underneath. Like in this case, I spray very thin blue all around the miniature to blend it and create this moonlight impression. Now, real quick, as I mentioned, this model is from today's sponsor, CA3D Studios. And funnily enough, they didn't really give me any talking points. So I can just say whatever I want. I could have painted any models they have, and I chose this one, because I do enjoy Berserk. But honestly, they have so many cool and recognizable models that it wasn't an easy choice, and I could imagine painting so many others. And actually, there are other YouTubers painting them, and it's really lovely to look at. So if you like any of their stuff, check out their Patreon and see for yourself. There will be a link in the description. And thank you CA3D Studios for sponsoring this video. To describe the fourth mistake, I gotta tell you that I especially struggle with this one myself. This realization came to me when I was watching a video from Eric Swinson. And as I was watching him paint his amazing Kingdom Death Mini, he started talking about something that really spoke to me. Speed painting can also teach you to be faster. Like, it's not gonna push your thinking just repeating the same stuff over and over again, but it'll help your muscle memory and brush control. But being too into your comfort zone is definitely not gonna make you improve your painting. And that's exactly it. For the longest time I was painting just armies and it was the same thing over and over again, which didn't necessarily push me further. On the other hand, nowadays I tend to spend too much time painting a model, and I don't get the numbers in to improve as well. It's good to paint variety of stuff and also strike the right balance of not spending too much time on your minis, but also not too little. And speaking of variety, initially I wanted to pick a female miniature for this video, because if you have seen my Instagram, that's something I really enjoy. But I wanted to try something different, something masculine, and also something where I can paint different atmosphere. Also, the scale is bigger than what I paint most of the time, so I'm glad that I tried that. So if you paint the same minis all the time and you wanna improve your skills, trying to paint entirely different things will push you further. That's also one of the reasons why I don't limit myself to just Warhammer and 32mm models. Now I want you to imagine two different scenarios. In one case, all of my mini painting equipment is stored in boxes and drawers, and I have to pull out my hobby lamp to actually start painting. And in the other scenario, everything will be readily accessible, I don't really have to set up too much stuff, and I can start painting within like a minute or two once I made the decision. In which case do you think I'll have a better chance of getting some painting done? Yeah, it's the latter one. You see, initially I wanted to say that the fifth mistake is not being consistent. But that's not really the root of the issue, is it? In an ideal world, we would all like to get more hobbying done, but if you have too much friction to actually start, no wonder it's hard to stay consistent. By forging your environment so you can easily paint anytime you want, you'll also stay more consistent as a byproduct. And if you paint more often, chances are you'll improve as well. Some of my favorite tips to stay consistent are: have your wet palette always ready. Use pre-cut parchment paper, and if you don't have that, make your own. Have a water bottle for painting ready so you don't have to go to sink. And basically every hobby tool you have should be easily accessible, so there is low friction and resistance to start painting. And listen, I fully realize that not everyone has the chance to forge their hobby space exactly the way they want. But if you wanna make your hobby space better, I made a video where I go through my own studio so you can see where you can make some improvements. So if you wanna make your hobby space better and more convenient, check it out, and see you there.